At a time of introspection, it seemed to me that all material substances and life forms that we know are subject to eventual despoiling, decay, and death, yet that there was at least one substance, namely water, familiar and ubiquitous, that had the amazing property of preserving itself through a process of phasing, that is, mutating, recycling through its three states of being, simply as a consequence of changes in ambient temperatures and pressures. A consequence of the magical properties of water to exist variously as formless flow, solid ice or gas, is that one can give very contrary descriptions to a substance whose atomic structure remains unchanged throughout its mutations, having 2 atoms of hydrogen and 1 of oxygen. Ice has the strength to hold fast whatever is caught within its unrelenting grip. Yet there is no grip to vaporous steam or invisible gas, whose molecules, set free from their hydrogen bonding under increasing temperature and pressure, dart freely hither and thither through Earth's atmosphere. Yet again, water as liquid can be predicated as insinuating and flowing, and as a substance constantly seeking the lowest point of gravity in its coursing. The 2 dominant notions to emerge were those of process and polarity, and I began to think in terms of an installation whose content not only conveyed a narrative of oppositions, for example solid weight and gaseous weightlessness, but also the metaphorical notion as of something once captive having regained its freedom. And so the idea of a balloon filled with helium, not the lightest of gases, but very light all the same, encapsulated in a sphere of ice that was to be brought out into an ambient temperature to melt, occurred to me as conveying both the idea of bondage and release, whilst at the same time presenting itself as a celestial object pleasing to the eye. It was now a question of making an installation by first staging simple experimental trials, and I found, watching the droplets of water, that I wanted to bring the additional element of sound into the installation. The sound had to be musical, not the concrete sound made by water impacting upon the ground. I began to think not only in terms of spherical, now celestial, bodies making music, but specifically of the kind of musical instrument I would choose for the droplets to produce the music I wanted. It was at this stage that Pythagoras, who 25 centuries ago concerned himself with the mathematics of proportion of music, entered my thinking. Pythagoras' notion of proportionality arose out of his observations of the 7 planets moving in the sky, their relative distances one from the other, Pythagoras believed, producing the music that was specific to each and only to be heard by mortals deserving of such heavenly sound. The mathematics of proportion of Pythagoras and his school, recorded by later historians, formed the basis on which the tonality and modes of music were put to the service of the cultural, health, and emotional welfare of humanity. His belief that the celestial bodies produce their own specific music, according to their relative distances one from the other, gave rise to the music of the spheres, a title which I've appropriated for my installation. I began to consider which musical instrument could best demonstrate visibly this notion of proportionality, because I now wanted to integrate every element in the installation to convey Pythagoras' idea. The sound had to be light, high-pitched and angelic, as properly belonging to the heavenly sphere, and I wanted the instrument to be traditional and folk, as having a universal relevance within a people's culture. I found the traditional glockenspiel with wooden frame and metal note bars. The musical sound was light and tinkling when the note bars were hit by its wooden beaters. But in order for my glockenspiel to be in proportion to the dimensions of the ice sphere suspended above it, the diameter of which was of necessity limited to 12 inches because of having to be kept in a freezer, I had to settle for the smallest of glockenspiels, one 17 inches in length and having 13 note bars that ranged in pitch from G below middle C to E above it. Proportionality could be seen in the relative lengths of the note bars. The longer the note bar, the lower the pitch, and conversely, the shorter the note bar, the higher the pitch. Nature's droplets of water from the melting ice were to be surrogate beaters, replacing the wooden beaters of manufacture. My wish now was for the helium balloon to float free from its icy moorings when the melting came to an end, and thus convey metaphorically the idea of something once captive in an alien environment as having found freedom within its natural medium.